Mike Mentzer was more than a Mr. Universe and Mr. Olympia contender. He was a man on a mission to elevate bodybuilding beyond superstition, fad, and blind repetition. For Mentzer, the gym was not just a place for physical transformation, but a proving ground for the mind. He spoke to bodybuilders in a way that was deeply personal because he addressed not only their training, but their inner life, the doubts, confusions, and aspirations that followed them into the weight room. As Mentzer explained in his own words,
"Not infrequently, I am told by bodybuilders that they enjoy the personal fashion in which my articles and books communicate to them. My writings are meaningful to many because in addition to dealing with limited bodybuilding issues, I also address their deepest concerns and interests. For instance, scores of bodybuilders from around the world who read my book, Heavy Duty 1, have informed me that it seemed like Chapter 1, entitled Bodybuilders Are Confused, was written specifically with him in mind. That through some special power, I was able to divine what was in his soul, and then make explicitly clear what he had only kinda, sorta known, or had merely sensed theretofore. Each was effusively grateful for what in effect was my having lifted the veil of mystification that had enshrouded his thinking and kept him confused on the subject of how to best proceed with his training. I accomplished this by logically identifying the nature and source of their confusion."
Mentzer believed that the first step toward achievement, whether in bodybuilding or in life, was clear thinking. Confusion, self-doubt, and uncertainty, he said, were monstrously intolerable and fundamentally opposed to confidence and happiness. He wanted bodybuilders to reclaim their ability to reason.
"It is this, understanding the nature and source of one's confusion, which is the first step toward resolving it. And make no mistake, confusion, self-doubt, and uncertainty can be monstrously intolerable, most assuredly incompatible with self-esteem, confidence, and happiness. Of course, I possess no special, non-rational insight which enables me to perceive things that others do not. I have diligently trained myself to use logic to be able to make valid, philosophic, scientific identifications of the facts of reality, something that anyone with a normal, intact, functioning brain and the appropriate motivation can learn to do."
For Mentzer, teaching a workout plan was secondary. His real mission was to teach thinking, reasoned, independent, and grounded in reality.
"It is not my intention to merely provide the listener with another bodybuilding program and expect you to then blindly follow it. That would not be worth much long range. Instead, my purpose is to teach you to think logically about training and nutrition so that ultimately you'll be able to think independently about these subjects and thus become your own trainer, your own coach, and never again have to rely on the suspect opinion of others."
Logic and the rejection of irrational dogma. One of Mentzer's most persistent battles was against the more is better mentality in bodybuilding. He saw most training advice as a mix of tradition, hearsay, and anti-logic, a set of ideas handed down without critical thought. He was particularly scathing toward the claim that overtraining did not exist.
For instance, the premise that there is no such thing as overtraining, only undereating. This idea represents the apotheosis of irrational thinking in this field, as it contradicts the most basic, fundamental principles of bodybuilding nutritional science. A brief, logical, critical analysis of this idea will reveal it immediately as a monumental absurdity. The notion that there is no such thing as overtraining, only undereating, implies that if you will only agree to overeat, then you can infinitely extend the limit to which you can train to stimulate the body to grow. And this simply is not true, because the supply of biochemical resources used up in the process of training to induce growth stimulation is of course strictly limited and cannot be restored instantaneously, which would have to be the case for this assertion to have any merit, no matter how much or how often one eats. Therefore, the amount of training one may engage in before it becomes overtraining is strictly limited. And if it were possible to infinitely extend the degree to which growth could be stimulated through the indefinite extension of training time and of the amount of food consumed, there would already be a legion of bodybuilders whose muscular development would far exceed that of Dorian Yates, as most bodybuilders today are chronically, grossly overtrained and overnourished. While the science of productive bodybuilding exercise is not infinitely complex, there's considerably more to it than the childlike simplistic notion that more is better. As children, many gain the notion that more jelly beans are better than less, then carry that unchecked, unchallenged premise through life and misapply it to many subjects, such as bodybuilding science. In fact, if you reflect for a moment, you'll realize that the more is better jelly bean premise is wrong too. Beyond a definite limited point, jelly beans make you sick, fat, and may cause dental problems. The premise more is better is actually an ethico-economic principle, i.e., more money, more knowledge, more values are better than less. One cannot take a principle from ethics or economics and apply it blindly to another context, such as bodybuilding, and expect any meaningful results. The premise more is better means precisely that. More is better means more is better. Look at the implicit logic, listener. There is a built-in guarantee. If 20 sets are good, 40 sets are even better, and 80 sets better still. You can't lose. The more exercise you perform, the better your progress. Again, it's a built-in guarantee. So why not just take off of work for 3 months, train 18 hours a day, and you'll reach Mr. Olympia caliber. You see now how useful logic is.
In his philosophy, logic was the ultimate safeguard, a tool for survival, for training, and for life itself. Without it, bodybuilders drifted from one routine to another, like a blind leap into the dark, never understanding why they failed to grow. Overtraining as a threat to life. Mentzer went beyond the claim that overtraining slowed progress. He warned that gross overtraining could harm health and even threaten life. His reasoning was simple. Weight training is a stressor. Too much stress, too frequently applied, taxes the body's limited resources and can lead to systematic breakdown. He cited the research of Dr. Kenneth Cooper, the father of aerobics, to illustrate the danger.
It may be life-threatening, as the recent research of Dr. Kenneth Cooper indicates. This is not so difficult to understand when you consider that intense weight training is a form of stress on the human physiology. And who has to be reminded that we are all rather delicate and vulnerable as living organisms? It only stands to reason that chronic, gross overtraining could inordinately tax the overall physical system and possibly result in a breakdown where there might be a weak link such as the glandular system. Dr. Cooper, in fact, attributes the lymph cancer of Lemieux, the hockey great, as well as that of Marty LaQuarrie, the distance runner, to overtraining.
Modern studies reinforce Mentzer's concerns. Cooper himself documented numerous cases of elite athletes who developed severe or fatal illnesses after prolonged periods of extreme training, from melanomas and brain tumors to hematologic cancers. A long-term Mayo Clinic study also found that individuals exercising at extreme volumes were more likely to develop heart disease than moderate exercisers, underscoring Mentzer's point that training beyond the body's ability to recover is not just unproductive, it can be dangerous. Why values matter: health, training, and independent thinking. But why would anyone care if their training method could lead to ill health, even death? The answer depends entirely on your value system. If you value your life, if you value your health, then it follows logically that a method of training which compromises either would not be something you'd embrace, especially if you were led to believe it was good for you. That kind of betrayal, the false promise of vitality that conceals long-term damage, should be not only alarming, but motivating. You'd want to know, and you'd want to warn others, particularly those you care about. But what if you don't know what you value? What if you've never taken the time to think through in words what really matters to you and why? Then you are a rudderless ship, drifting wherever the cultural winds blow. And in the age of social media, where trend, hype, and influence come at you from all directions, those winds are fierce. This is why Mike Mentzer emphasized the importance of identifying and understanding your values, not just feeling them, not just sensing what feels good, but translating your deepest emotional reactions, your sense of life, as he called it, into conscious, verbalized principles that can guide action.
My favorite concept, which is sense of life, my preconceptual, emotionally integrated view of life, the childhood equivalent of a mature irrational philosophy, and that's been my policy now explicitly, not on the level of emotional subconscious, but on the explicit level of a conscious, mature, irrational philosophy.
To Mike, this was the most important adult intellectual activity one can engage in, taking what he called your sense of life, things that when you were younger you found gave you pleasure and that you found important, and translating these into a verbalized understanding of your own personal value system. Ask yourself, what do I value? Why do I value it? How do I act to protect and express it? Once you know these answers intellectually, not just emotionally, you become resistant to manipulation, less vulnerable to fads, and more capable of staying on course. You're less likely to be swayed by marketing jargon, peer pressure, or the illusion of safety in numbers. Mentzer's philosophy was never confined to the gym. He repeatedly emphasized that bodybuilding should serve a larger human goal, the pursuit of knowledge, reason, and happiness. He admired Aristotle and embraced a life devoted to rational, positive values.
It was Aristotle, the discoverer of the laws of logic, the principles of thought, who said that a friend is that other person in whom one sees himself, one's values reflected in the person of another. Those who find my philosophy interesting and attractive share a certain mutuality of values with me, if not always on the level of explicit verbalized understanding, at least in terms of subconscious, emotional, or sense of life affinity.
He was explicit about what he valued most.
I have worked conscientiously over a span of many years developing my philosophy, especially that aspect of most central significance, my values, which are of a positive nature. Specifically, I value reason, objectivity, logic, knowledge, science, human progress, and happiness.
For Mentzer, the mind was the primary muscle. He urged his students to read, to think, and to cultivate themselves beyond the walls of the gym. He warned against a life that was one enormous betrayal if all one did was train without developing as a full human being.
Why not consecrate this moment to that goal of not just actualizing your full muscular potential, but to the constant active expansion of your knowledge, to an ever-widening range of achievement, including the reaching of your full human stature, which can be accomplished only by learning how to think properly, logically, not merely about the best manner in which to proceed with your bodybuilding, but about all of the crucial fundamental issues of human existence.
Conclusion. Mike Mentzer's legacy is far more than a training program. It is a call to rational living. He taught that muscle without mind is incomplete, that training without logic is wasted effort, and that life without the pursuit of values is a betrayal of human potential. His warnings about overtraining were rooted in both biological reality and moral conviction. Respect the body, respect reason, and pursue life with the full stature of a thinking human being. Some critics argue that while Mentzer's conclusions about training may have been logically sound, they lack the kind of empirical validation seen in academic journals. They suggest that logic alone is insufficient to uncover truths about muscle growth, that what we need is data. But this critique misunderstands both logic and Mentzer's actual methodology. Mike never applied logic in a vacuum. He wasn't building castles in the cortex, as some might say. On the contrary, his conclusions were informed by data, just not the kind gathered in sterile laboratories. Over the course of his career, Mike personally trained more than 2,000 individuals, both in person and through consultations. He observed real-world outcomes, tracked results, and applied the same level of scrutiny to training variables as any scientist would to a controlled experiment. But what gave that data meaning What allowed it to guide action was logic. Because without a rational framework for interpreting evidence, what is data really? A collection of isolated facts. And worse, in the world of bodybuilding, the data is often contradictory. Studies conflict, individual responses vary, and fitness conventional wisdom shifts with trends. In such an environment, logic becomes not optional, but essential, the only tool we have for sorting truth from noise, cause from coincidence. That's why Mike placed such emphasis on having a non-contradictory theory. To him, a proper training theory wasn't just a loose collection of anecdotes or a mishmash of science papers. It was a logically integrated guide to successful human action. His heavy-duty system was built through the... In Mentzer's world, the true champion is not just the one who lifts the heaviest weight. It is the one who thinks the clearest, lives by rational values, and achieves strength in both body and mind.